first read the books? Like, when did you first connect with it?
I was down in New Zealand, back in New Zealand, in 2007? 6? I don't know. Doing, I think it might have been 7, doing television, what do you call it, like a mini-series of Hercules, the Hallmark Hercules, and I got to play Linus, Hercules' Samwise, basically. Linus could play a lyre and sing a little bit. I don't know if you ever hear Sam sing. Maybe the song, drinking song again, but Sam's voice isn't the strongest of all the hobbits in those. But anyhow, so I was down there, and Paul Telfer, who played Hercules in that rendition of Hercules, was really, really excited one day because this man named Terry Pratchett was coming to town in Auckland. And he was a kind of a relaxed guy, Paul was, and he was like giddy, like a little kid. And he tried to explain to me what the Discworld series was and who this author was and what he meant to him. And he said, you know, my father, who's a Scottish guy, Mr. T, they said that's how they raised each other, him and his dad. He said, we went through, you know, my adolescence and early 20s reading Terry Pratchett together and learning about life that way. And then literally downstairs from our hotel and just around the corner, steps away, was the, I want to say, Dimmock's bookstore. It might have been a Whitcool's. Those are the name of the bookstores in New Zealand. There he was. So we went and stood online, like you guys are doing this weekend. And bought the book and standing in line maybe for an hour and 15 minutes. And then when we got to the front of the line, somebody whispered to him that there was a hobbit in front of him. And he looked up, and in his professorial, impish way, he jumped up and to shake hands, and I did what Americans do, I leaned forward for an embrace. Many Brits are not so comfortable with the embrace idea, but he received it as well as he could. And I might have tried that like 7 or 8 times in that first 30 seconds, but anyhow, so then he gave a speech, and he invited me, and I went and listened to the lecture, and then it was a long time after that, you know, I admired him, and I was a fan, and as I was reading The Color of Magic, the character of Twoflower was one of the great literary characters, a really, really, really wonderful character. He has a chest. Actually, his chest box, like a trunk, was really his Samwise, and it had 100 legs. And the trunk would always appear whenever he needed it. And if he'd open it up, there was like endless amounts of gold, which Twoflower didn't really care all that much about. Gold was like dirt where he came from. And but he was always looking for things, and the trunk was always there. And then he makes friends with Rincewind, the wizard from the Unseen University, the failed wizard who'd been kicked out of the Unseen University, and somehow they're put together. There's assassins and brigands and thieves, and it's just like one of the coolest things ever. So anyhow, I remember I had gotten in really good shape, and I was sitting on my bed, and my wife came in with the phone in her hands, and she had this look on her face. And she said, they want you to play Twoflower. I thought she was, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, don't mess with me. That's, really? Yeah. And it wasn't an audition, and it wasn't a thing. It was, here's an amount of money. Please come to London and work on the Terry Pratchett story. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. And then I started feeling really nervous. With Samwise, I wasn't that nervous because I didn't know the Lord of the Rings. If I knew the Lord of the Rings, I would have been terrified and probably not able to perform. But I was just doing what I thought was right on that one. But with this one, I knew that Twoflower, really it could have been cast by a Japanese person, because in Pratchett's mind, he was kind of satirizing the nature of the tourist in Hawaii. And so we sort of went with the Midwestern, you know, Missouri with the flower print shirt type tourist, as opposed to the Japanese with all the cameras type tourist in his mind from the 50s. But anyhow, we did it, and I got to be quite friendly with him. I went to dinner with him, and went to his home and saw his cats, and he was, he had this great, there's so many great quotes, and I won't get them right, but one of them was, death was a character in many of his books. A really kind of wonderful character. And sometimes scary, but not really scary. And Death said, don't think of death as dying. Just think of it as leaving the party early to avoid the rush. He's got like a trillion of these incredible quotes. And anyhow, so I was with him in the early days right after he was diagnosed, and he was very worried because because there was so much left to do. And even he was really a stalwart for Alzheimer's funding and research, and also for assisted suicide. He really believed that that was, you know, a dignified, should be a dignified option for people who wanted it. According to his publisher, he died quietly, surrounded by his family and his cat, and that he didn't, you know, that he died naturally. But anyhow, he was a champion for those things. He was knighted, which I really, really wish I could have talked to him, because he was such a kind of a anti-establishment, counterculture figure, that the idea of getting knighted, I just was wondering what he was, the photograph of him getting knighted, he just looked so just blissful and at peace and happy. And so, but anyhow, so that's all. I mean, this stuff, there's a society of people, you know, that like the Tolkien societies that exist and the Tolkien groups, and the Pratchetts are like that, but they're not as kind of popularized somehow, because the movies, you know, we made this movie and it was a wonderful television event, but it didn't do what Lord of the Rings did. And I just thought, dragons, you go to this place called the Wormburg. It's an upside down mountain. It's where all the dragons live. And as long as you're close to the Wormburg, you can conjure your own dragons. So Two-Flower conjures a dragon named Ninereeds, and he rides him, and he and Winston are escaping the baddies, leaving the Wormburg until they get a certain amount of distance away, and then the dragon like dissolves and they fall thousands of feet into the ocean. And so, anyhow, so there.
And I wouldn't be surprised if you could get a copy of that somewhere on the show floor. You can take a look, and there's probably some books out there, yeah. But let us take a question from this young person. Hi there. Someone help her with that microphone.
Just before we start with questions, I just want to say, if people